All right, good evening. Here we are. I got Terell on the line here with me, and what we're going to be doing tonight is we're going to go freewheeling through space and time. It looks like you're at the beach, Terell.
Yeah.
Congratulations for being at the beach.
Good
Thanks
evening,
for
Chris. I
taking
wish,
time
right? I
out of
wish.
your day to join us. This is fantastic, and we're going to go freewheeling and talking about what's happening in the market right now. This is a really big deal. We've seen a lot of craziness in the last couple of days. Why don't you give us your opinion on what's happening with the Fed meeting? Because the Fed meeting came back just this last week and they didn't lower the base at all. What do you think about that? What do you think that does to impact the buyers out there and the sellers?
So good question there, right? I guess it raises some concerns, right? It's a different time in the market now. Nothing to be scared or discouraged, but to be aware, right? Uh, Looks like new construction is down about 2%,
Mhm.
right? So in addition to that, rents have risen about 8%.
So that's kind of crazy, isn't it? I mean, you're looking at the Fed and the media, the interest rates are staying the same. We're seeing rents go up. We're seeing less homes being built. What's going on with demand out there? What are you seeing?
Well, I'm seeing that, right? As I've shared with a lot of my buyers. I need to have the conversation with my sellers, right? I give them both sides of the story. If I'm working with sellers, I give it to them on the selling side, but also how a buyer perceives the process and vice versa.
Hmm.
One thing for sure we know is that we cannot control the rent price, right? The landlord has the cards or has the leverage, so to speak. Uh, Interest rates are still a bit higher than what we would prefer. Considering 21, 22, right? Uh, but again, you can't control rent price. I tell my buyers now, hey, you pay more for the house, expect to pay more for the house, expect to pay a higher interest rate, keep your credit, your financials in a good space. When the rates do lower, prepare for a refinance. You already have the hard asset in hand.
Hmm.
In my earnest opinion, it may sound biased because I'm a real estate professional. I get it. Uh, but it's not time to bet against the professionals, right? In other words, the realtors, loan officers as yourself, appraisers, et cetera. I don't see a huge uh, inventory just sweeping through that will affect prices, right, to make them more affordable.
So let's
Uh,
focus on rent a little bit here because the
Absolutely.
rent thing is such a big deal and people I don't think realize that. I'm going to share the screen real quick with you just
Sure.
to kind of go through some basic numbers here that I did actually for somebody else. But let's talk through these numbers real quick because I think that the numbers need to speak for themselves when it comes to what's happening here. Let's just say that you're getting an amazing rent at $1,200 a month. Wouldn't that be pretty doggone, I mean, sexy rent?
Would love it this time of day, right?
I know, isn't that fantastic? And
Absolutely.
why would you want to move when your payment is $2,200 for the house?
That's a big difference, right?
I know, but initially your monthly payments, it looks like you're losing money on this transaction. It doesn't make sense. But here's the thing, in 5 years, you'll have paid $72,000 towards rent and you'll have zero net worth,
Absolutely. No equity at all.
no
No ownership.
equity. And yet these guys right here will have $21,000 worth of equity after 5 years. I mean, that's a pretty significant number. What would you do to what would you say to somebody who's thinking about, with that? I mean, we've heard that argument so many times, right? I'm going to stay because it's cheaper for me to rent.
We do hear it quite often, sometimes daily, right? But again, it goes back to what you just shared. Owning, controlling the asset, right? Having equity, future equity versus enriching the landlord,
Hmm.
right? You'll never have ownership. You'll never control that price.
Right.
It's like take the bite now and get the relief later, right?
That's right. So I'm
Put
going to show
yourself in
you,
position.
I want to show you one more thing though, because
Sure.
I think this needs to enhance our conversation, but it needs to enhance the buyer's conversation out there that are sitting in rentals. And look at this. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to say, home owner, OWNER net worth or versus renter net worth. See, it's right there. Okay. And this is just the Google result. Homeowner is 43 more times wealthier than the typical renter. How
Wow, significant.
how do you answer somebody? I mean, what do you do with these people that are out there kind of like it's just cheaper for me to rent? Is it really?
So it's getting them to consider the long play, right? Uh, right now, it appears, yes, you're winning with if we went by numbers, 1,200 versus the 2,200. Uh, we do understand it's one of the largest, if not the largest investment for most people. But as you just shared there, real estate ownership is one of the best ways to create wealth, right? And the way real estate really should work is slow incremental increases in value, right? Uh, let's think about things. When we deal with real estate, it's shelter. Everybody needs shelter,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
great point.
Uh, and it's pros and challenges and everything, but I would say real estate for the most part is less affected by emotion compared to some other great investments like a stock market, right? At the end of the day, still you need shelter, whether it's a business, commercial space, industrial, etc. I think
Mhm.
it's a great retirement plan if you ask me, right? In addition to owning your own shelter.
So that's a great point, and I have a story to share about that. Do you mind if I share the story?
Have at it.
It's extremely personal, actually, because it's my family.
Got it.
When I was growing up, we were very, 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 very blue collar, almost rust collar, you know.
Come on.
We were pretty blue collar. And I remember when I was growing up that I mean, I don't remember, we had a mattress on the floor for quite a while. I don't remember how long, but I remember it being a long time.
Got you.
And that was my bed. That's how I grew up. And then what was interesting about it is I remember we never missed a meal, but later on as I grew up, I realized how my parents were doing it. Is they were doing it through credit cards. They were,
Got you.
feeding us through credit cards and doing everything. But now, fast forward a little bit, you get to be a little bit more aware of what they do. My parents bought their first house in the 80s. And in the 80s, I mean, they were making a ton of money. I mean, once again, we were sleeping on mattresses, not even on a bed. And they paid 19.5% interest on that house.
Wow.
Yeah, nineteen and a
And
half
we cry about
percent.
six and sevens and maybe eight.
Yeah, and they refinanced later, but we'll leave that alone. But they did a great thing with that real estate. They never sold the house. They still own that house.
Nice.
Still own that house. They bought it back in that day. 1980 salaries back then were like 13, $14,000 a year. And this house was, I don't know, it was very rural area. It was like way out in the sticks. And they paid, I want to say, just under 30,000 for the house, which was a tremendous amount of money back then. Um, and they held on to the house. Now, the house in the time frame that we're talking about from then till now, the house they could sell for 200,000 plus right now, easily
Oh,
now,
exactly.
200,000. So they would net some money based off of that. But then they paid the house off. They did the right thing because what they did is they saved their pennies, they accelerated their payments, and they paid the house off. And then what they did is they went and bought another house and they turned the departing residence into a rental.
Mm,
And then they started making money off of the rental, and then they lived in this house. And then they saved their money and paid this house off. And then they went and bought two or three other pieces of land. And so, I mean, there's a book out there called The Millionaire Next Door.
yes. Good book.
That's
I've
my
read it
parents.
several times.
That's my parents. That's what they did. They literally they did they're my parents are now in their 80s. They have probably over $1 million worth of property, but it's literally all paid for, and they only live on Social Security, and they only have the rental from these properties. But these properties are keeping them independent in those days.
What a blessing.
And so that goes back to your wealth thing that, and also that piece that I showed you that you just at Google, it's very easy. 43 times more, net worth than somebody who's renting.
It's a no-brainer. It's a
And
no-brainer.
you sell real estate all the time. So I'm sure you've seen stories, heard stories, seen them firsthand.
Absolutely. I have some clients of mine that I've been fortunate and blessed to work with and turn multiple deals over the years with, and they continue to add to the portfolio. And For most people, I get it, right? It's a fear factor. I remember jumping into my first deal, which was a personal deal. We think about the lease. It's not a 6 month deal. It's not a 9 month deal. What happens if you lose a job, this, that, and the third, emergencies? But the reality is we all need to have good shelter, whether, you stay with family, rental, home that you own, etc. Why not own if it's affordable, right?
And
Uh, and
that's interesting because you said earlier that rents are going up, and you're right. The statistic is that they're going up almost 1% this year, which means that that $1,200 payment is going to continue to go, that we had in that one shot that I shared, is going to continue to go up. And home prices, even though things are a little slower than they've been, what are the projected home prices increases that we're seeing in this area?
that still strong in my opinion, right?
Okay.
I'm not seeing anything falling. Of course, we get price adjustments here and there, but overall, prices are still soaring.
Mm-hmm.
So that's telling us we still have some health in the market. Inventory is still low because demand is up, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and we just don't have enough supply to try to curb that, so to speak.
I mean, I think the great thing is once you lock in the price of a home, you really don't have to, you don't have to worry about your rent going up every month.
Absolutely.
It's kind of a nice scenario there when it comes to stuff like that. Now, what are you thinking? Now, you mentioned something was very interesting with the housing data based off of the home builders. Sounds like the home builders are actually down in their housing starts. Now, how is that going to affect the buyer's market in the near future?
If I had to take a stab at this, right? If new construction is down, how much more does it make the current resales worth? More value, right? Uh, so more of a price increase is how I would see it, right?
Right.
That's one of the things that would help inventory would be new construction, flips, etc. But if we have a decrease in new construction, we can only expect that the increase of regular resales will take place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in fact, I'm looking at the statistics right now. It says it's down 2%, which means that they're on a pace to do about 1.3 million units per year. But household formations as of right now, and this is just household formations, this has nothing to do with the other people, is about 1.2 million per year of household formations. So, I mean, those people are looking for homes already, and that doesn't even account the other people who are not forming families. That's a crazy
Good
conversation.
data, good data.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So in your opinion, I mean, with this whole Fed thing that's going on right now, what's the solution to the housing?
From a buyer's perspective,
Yeah.
buckle up, make the investment, right? Get with a good loan officer as yourself. Uh, if you need a pre-approval, etc., go over the financials, make the sacrifice. That's what it is,
Hmm.
right? Because look at it as paying yourself over the long haul. It's so much you can do with the home. Of course, ownership equity. Uh, Consider getting a HELOC, a refinance, taking some of that money, putting towards the next home, as you mentioned what your parents did, right? It's a
Hmm.
great way to get a rental portfolio started, retirement, but also a great way to do what? Leave a legacy for children, grandchildren, etc.
Now, that's a great thing. Let's talk about that real quick because that's leaving a legacy. I think that's a missed piece of the puzzle right now. Because I think a lot of grandparents are sitting on the sidelines. They have a ton of equity, they have a ton of money. Obviously, we want to help them make sure that they're safe and they're secure and they're able to make it through to the next stage in life. But why wait until you're past to help your grandkids buy a house?
Absolutely.
How
Start early.
how would you tailor that conversation for somebody if we had a grandparent looking at this today? What would you say to them?
If they definitely were in a good space in which they could afford and would like to leave something as a legacy, sit down with the grandkids, see where they are financially, have transparency, right? Make sure they're not in over the head, so to speak. Maybe go on deed with them, go on title, right?
So co-sign with them.
Absolutely, right? If you need, if there are credit issues and maybe some financial backing,
Mhm.
but give them a head start, right?
Mhm.
Every generation should be better, right? When we look at and study wealth, each generation usually gets better. right? Uh, Again, real estate is a great investment. Grandparents, a lot of them, as you mentioned with your parents earlier, they bought homes at a much lower price, so they have a lot more equity, right? So they have money to gift, so to speak, to help the kids, grandkids get on home base. Um,
Now, I'm seeing a lot of the grandparents who maybe don't necessarily have a ton of money. I'm seeing them actually help out. I mean, my parents don't have a ton of money, but they are living independently. And I'm seeing that a lot of these grandparents are actually turning homes into multi-generational homes. And so, what would be something from your perspective as a real estate professional? What would you recommend to some of maybe these grandparents or grandkids who are thinking of multi-generational with grandparents or parents or something like that? What would be one of your recommendations for that?
Good question. So, what we've been seeing in the last few years, multi-generational homes are a big thing, right? A lot of parents are coming back with the kids and grandparents, et cetera. So the price may be considered hefty on one individual, but if you got parents and or grandparents that can contribute, will contribute. In addition to that, cares at the home. You don't have to put them in a nursing or assisted living home, right? There's a lot of options. So a home, carriage house, right? Mother-in-law suite. Still, there's a bit of independence, but on the same property, if that makes sense. A
Yeah, we
lot
call
of
them
them.
we call that in the mortgage world, we call that an accessory dwelling unit.
Absolutely.
And that is a fantastic way because if it ever does get vacated, you can rent that portion and still create some additional income through that.
Correct.
That's fantastic. Now, are you seeing more of that these days?
I'm seeing a bit more. Of course, it comes with a cost. It's something that's been real big. I've seen a lot of it around the start of the pandemic, right? People are building the ADUs, accessory dwelling units, or they're looking for properties with that option. Whether it was Airbnb, midterm rentals, traveling nurses, executives, etc. Right? People coming through town may need to hold down a spot for a few months at a time. In addition to that, sometimes it's maybe temporary care for family, where somebody works from home now, they can watch the parents or the grandparents. So there's a lot of value. It's a big value add, in my opinion.
I mean, the great thing about that is if you did buy a home with an accessory dwelling unit, you can actually use the income from that unit to help you qualify and buy the house. That's a great thing.
That's major.
It's almost like buying a duplex or a triplex or a multi-unit. You can with a multi-unit, in fact, you can get into a multi-unit with as little as 3%, 3.5%. And you can use the rents from the other units to actually help you, make the qualification on the house. So that's a nice thing to go with.
Very strong.
Very strong. So I mean, as the job market, I think there's a little bit of fear out there. You tell me what you're seeing when you're talking to people. Are you seeing fear mainly? Is it that's causing people to sit it out, or what are you seeing?
I am. I mean, there are some individuals that will discuss, well, what happened if I lose my jobs, right? If we tune into the news, we're hearing about some jobs that are disappearing, right? People are losing their jobs, replacements, etc. A few questions in the market right now. I mean, it's with the territory, right? Uh, but nothing's guaranteed. Let's think about it. It's life, right? It's
That's
putting your
right.
ducks in a row and taking the chance.
hmm hmm So if you were to be sitting in the situation right now trying to buy a house, what would be one of your suggestions? Let's just say to somebody who's trying to buy their first home. We'll start with them.
So all of my new buyers, like first time buyers, I have the conversation. This is a true story. If Terrell had to do it all over again, I would have bought a duplex or a triplex, right?
Really?
If I had to do it all over again. Uh, Reason being, as you mentioned earlier, you have one home that you'll stay in and the other home for possible rent, right? It can offset the mortgage, right? My first piece of property that I bought, it was a challenging purchase, to be honest. It was an FHA loan with a 203K repair loan. So it's one loan, of course, but it had a repair side. And a lot of individuals probably would say no to it, right? But That gave me an advantage at that time because a lot of people are looking for turnkey properties, right? Love HGTV, but a lot of people have gotten to feel if it's not HGTV ready, that they'll just pass on it, right?
Right.
So to put this in context, maybe find a duplex, a triplex, or a quadplex that needs some TLC, some tender love and care, maybe some repairs, maybe not an overall gut, so to speak, right? But need some repairs. And maybe that'll be something that most people say, hey, I don't want to deal with that. And can come in with a lower price, get some repairs, and steadily build equity, but also get rent each month from.
So your suggestion, from what I'm hearing, is buy the first investment home or buy the first stepping stone. Don't try to get the best of everything.
Absolutely.
That's a great strategy. That's actually what I did when I bought my first house.
Really?
Yeah, I did, and I wish I'd have kept it. I wish I'd have been like my parents and kept it, because I'm going to tell you, it needed so much love and lipstick. It needed a lot of love, and we put a lot of love into it. And when I sold it 3 years later and moved to another state, we made some good money on it. And
Nice.
in 3 years, which is not typical in a sale of a home.
That's
It
right.
takes usually, a little bit more time for that to happen, but we sold and made the home within 3 years. Okay, so now what's your suggestion to people who are looking to get out of that first home and move into the next home? What's your suggestion to them?
Well, location, right? I always ask my sellers one question. Do we have to sell?
Okay,
And what's your motivation to sell,
okay.
right? Find out what the motivation, if it's a change in lifestyle, work, location, family dynamics, etc. Uh, and one of the main things, especially with this market, is if you've owned a home for a while, it's a good chance that you have a lot of equity. We may need to be prepared in a lot of cases to take all of that equity and possibly more to get into the next home, right? Especially when we think about upgrading, more square footage, location is everything in real estate, right? Uh, it's a conversation that needs to be had. What are the moving pieces? What do we need versus what do we want? Right? Needs need to be met. We need wants also. We like to think about in real estate. If we can get an 8 out of a 10, we're pretty much hitting a home run, unless we're building brand new custom construction. Right?
Which at that point you're paying a premium
Absolutely.
because now you're getting everything new, which is there's nothing wrong with that. That's a great way to go. But it really does it's like buying a new car. You drive it off the lot and the next day it's not worth, but a third.
Absolutely.
I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you get the idea.
Absolutely. I
And
used
it
to sell
takes a
cars
while.
back in the day.
Yeah, and it takes a while for it to build back up. I get it. So okay, so that's a great concept. Now, what about the person who is like, my house is too big. I need to downsize. What would be the steps for somebody like that?
Find out what they need, right? Like square footage. This is one that I have fun with this in my consultations. Finding out from my buyers, are we really married to a particular range of square footage? I've always been one, numbers look good on paper, but if I can't utilize it, how good are those numbers? So where I'm going with this, Terrell, I don't want anything under 2,500 square feet. So I can go show you a 4 bed, 3.5 bath, huge primary. The bedrooms start to get smaller, and it's a real partition of chopped up walls. But you have your 2,500 square feet, or I can take you into an 1,875 square foot home that's an open concept, right? Which is going to have more weight, right? So knowing what they really need. Again, want some of the wants in there, got to have the needs. Uh, Going back to location, uh, you know, it's almost like having a T sheet, right? Almost like the assets and liabilities. Here's the wants, here's the needs. I think of buying as a process of elimination instead of a process of selection, right? So think of it like a funnel. We start out wide, and then a lot of times we taper down during the process, right? When we first get started buying, hey, I have to have hardwood floors. I have to have level 3 granite countertops, etc. Right? And making sure if it's more than one person that has a voice in this deal that's actually going to live here, making sure that they're on the same page because we're all on the same team, right? You as the loan officer, myself as a realtor, and our buyers.
So, what do you think that the general public is actually struggling with right now when it comes to misinformation? Because I think there is some misinformation out there related to the housing business right now. So what are some of the misinformation that you feel like buyers and sellers might be struggling with?
I think big thing that they're definitely dealing with interest rates. They're dealing with the increase and the retention of home prices, but also job losses, right? Uh,
Hmm.
it's typical. It's something to take in, but it's just something to be aware of,
Hmm.
right? Uh, we, we we hear out in the field, so to speak, foreclosures, right? Even in a very uh, healthy market, whether it's high inventory or lower inventory, foreclosures unfortunately still happen at times, right? Uh, People are worried about foreclosures. Some are. The other token, they're waiting. Some of them talk about, well, more foreclosures come in, price is going to lower. Even if a decent amount of foreclosures come in, and you can speak more to this than I can, as a loan officer, you see a lot more data and files. I really don't believe it's enough if it happened. A decent amount of foreclosures were to be released, it's enough to catch up with the need, if that makes sense, right?
Right. Hmm. So I think there's some economic things that are happening behind the scenes right now that are going to cause some pain for the upcoming future. And I'll just tell you some of what I mean by this. I remember during my parents' time and my time too, because I struggled with credit cards for a while as well. And I'm going to tell you that there's nothing that tastes so bad as having heavy credit card debt. There's nothing that is bad as that. You just can't. You get to the point where you're not only you're handcuffed, but you feel like you're drowning. It really does. I think there's a lot of that going on right now. I think there's a lot of that going on. I think there's a lot of, I'm going to call it social realignment, but the divorce attorneys call it divorce. And we're seeing,
Gotcha.
I'm seeing a fair amount of that happening right now. And we're seeing that play into the market as well. Retail sales came in 1% less than what they were expecting it to be. There's just all sorts of crazy data. The credit card bills, if you look at a national level when they do the reporting, they're at an all-time high. So a lot of people came off of that low swing, low interest rates in the pandemic, and they never adjusted their lifestyles, and it came up. And I remember the stress my parents were in with those credit card bills. It caused a lot of family relationship problems. It caused a lot of problems to a lot of things. And I think that there's a lot of people that are going through that right now when it comes to that specific piece. How would you counsel them when it comes to, maybe separation, divorce, when it comes to the house itself? What would you encourage them to do?
Well, it's never an easy conversation, right? Uh, Believe it or not, some partners, even after the divorce, they still remain amicable, right? The friends, cordial. If they are in position, do they have to sell a house? It's a dynamic. There's a lot of moving pieces there, right? Uh, Finding out if there's an opportunity, somebody would buy another partner out, or if it's a deal, hey, we're just going to market, Terrell. You know, you go see my significant other, have them sign, I'll sign, etc. Right? Uh, Looking at the overall debt situation, as you mentioned, credit card debt is at one of the all-time highs here in our nation right now, right? Uh, a lot of people, unfortunately, they are floating on credit cards just to make it right now. That's the reality, right? Um, Look at the overall impact it's going to make on the family. Look at debt. Are there any solutions? Like I always ask, do you have to sell a home? Right? Sometimes the homes do get sold off market, right? Just to keep the privacy, so to speak, right? Everybody's not willing to put the business out there if they don't have to about the divorce, right? A lot of times that comes up when the home does hit the market, right? A lot of buyers want to know, why is the home being sold, right? Uh, Tell me on your side, right, what you've seen. I mean, some of these guys and girls, they do become buyers maybe for the first time or the second time after, as you mentioned earlier, the social realignment, right?
So I'm actually working with four right now, four families that are going through this situation, and one of them, two of them are fairly amicable. Third one was amicable until he realized um, that he was handcuffed from doing anything until after the divorce was settled. Actually, I got five of them right now that I think about it.
Wow.
And then I've got one that is anything but amicable. And it is, and I'm trying to navigate that with them and be a word of stability in their lives. But I'm going to tell you that it's anything but stability. They lose everything real quickly when it comes to that. I guess what I would say is that there's usually indicators leading up to that
Mhm.
that kind of show that you're headed down that path and that it's coming very quickly. A lot of times these divorce situations do happen because of finances. In my parents' case, they could have easily done it because of credit cards. I could, it was a tough time. But working together is more important than working apart and trying to find a way to pull it off. Now, if you can't pull it off, I think that there's a couple options that you have in the market when it comes to this. One of which is the spouse, in some cases, can assume the loan if they can credit and income qualify. And so that is a great way for people who can do that. But there are people who just simply can't do that. And they have to split the equity in half with either side, and then they have to figure it out from there. The problem is a separation. Just because you're separated and because one person's making payments on the house doesn't mean you're exempt from having that debt in your name. And so we run into a lot of people that don't realize that, and that it's not without hope. It's just that there's a period of time that we have to go through in order to make sure that that debt is squared up and squared away. I would say that the most important thing that I see when it comes to these types of situations is obviously we don't want to get into who struck John in that situation. We really want to try to make it as professional on both sides as we can. But I do have to say that for the most part, if you can keep it amicable, at least through either through the listing of the home, because there's a lot of disappointment, right? People are invested in the home, it's getting torn out of their hands because life is getting torn out of their hands. There is hope. It's not the final chapter. It is not fun, but there's ways to build off of this as you get better. And I'm going to tell you, from my experience, at least from looking at these different divorces, the five that I'm dealing with right now, they're better off unloading that house because of the memories that are in that house. They're better off just making a clean break and getting out and going into something new and creating new memories and turning the page. Even if it's not ideal, turn the page, get into something, make new memories rather than try to stay in the old thing and deal with it. So I think that would be a huge suggestion that I would make to a lot of people is just find a way to make something like that happen.
That's big what you just said, like the emotional ties.
Yeah,
But in addition to that, if you have two responsible people uh, that's on the loan, if it's DTI or whatever can be affected, right? Or will affect it rather, you may have to sell a home in order for the next person or maybe both to move, right?
right.
That is key. It's a conversation that has to be had. And like you said, a lot of people may have one spouse say, hey, I don't want to lose the memories, right? The other does. So that becomes a challenge in itself, right? It's getting people on the same page to sell sometimes.
Hmm. That's a challenge. So we're going to wrap up here in a couple seconds, but you're at the beach right now.
Lovely. It's great here in Jamaica. No, I'm just kidding. A little bit of a background here to remind
Yeah,
myself I do need a vacation, right?
there you go. That's fantastic. So, what would you recommend to people who are thinking about buying that beach house or that second home or that vacation spot? What would you recommend to them?
Give Chris Parks a call first, right?
You're
Or
kind.
go ahead, get pre-approved,
Uh-huh.
uh, and step out there on faith. Make
Yeah.
it happen.
Yeah.
Right. The worst case scenario, let's think about it in real estate. If you buy at a good price, you keep it long enough, it's usually going to increase in price anyway,
Yeah. Hmm.
right? Build some equity, depending upon what it is, a good write-off, etc.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, if you can get something at the beach anywhere, and rent it out just a couple months out of the year. Usually that pays for the bills for the whole house for the long time.
Absolutely.
And if you get a management company, many times it may cost you a little bit to get the management company, but it's way better for you than it is just to sit on a pile of cash that's not doing anything in your account.
That's right.
All right. Any final words before we let people go?
Now is the time to buy, as always. Give Chris Parks a call and let's make it happen.
All right. So Terell is here with me tonight. We've been spending some time just talking general terms. So glad you joined us, and we'll do this again very soon. So thank you for joining me, Terell.
Appreciate it. Thank you for the invite. Have a good one. Take
All right.
care.